We're on top of Myers Hill, which is the latest acquisition by the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust, just slightly over 73 acres on the top of this hill. And this is really kind of the opening of the second week of the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. A lot of people forget that there was a second week to the battle. Things happened at the Mule Shoe on May 12th and then kind of forget that, oh gosh, the battle actually extends for a whole nother week. After Grant fails to break through at the Mule Shoe and hold on to his successes there, he's going to, instead of trying to push through, try to work his way around. And so that means he's going to extend the left flank of his army. That means he's going to start stretching eastward and southward to get to the Fredericksburg Road. And once he gets across the road, he's going to set his sights on this hill because it offers an excellent platform for his artillery. It would also protect him from any Confederate artillery. So what he wants to do is try to assault this spot on the 14th of May, which is then going to put him sort of on the flank and rear of the Confederate Army and give him a chance at finally dislodging Lee from Spotsylvania Courthouse.
I didn't even realize till we're standing here that we are on a hill. That's another interesting thing about the Civil War, just the topography, and you really see it here.
Topography is the key to the whole Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse, and Myers Hill is really the great sort of a mini case study in that. We can see here, if we kind of pan off in this direction, we can see downhill. It's hard to tell in the summertime when all the foliage is on the leaves around here. It doesn't quite look so formidable, but that's actually a pretty steep hill that the Federals are going to have to come up to assault the Confederate position on the top of this hill. If we kind of pan over in this direction, we can see the rise in the hill here. So topography is going to be a key part of this action here on May 14th, 1864.
You put leaves on the trees in May, and this does become really a tough place to gauge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, the topography today looks a little different. The foliage, this area has been cut, so we've got second growth forest. At the time, this was actually an open farm field, so it wasn't quite so formidable. So really, it's hard to kind of go back in time and see what things look like for those soldiers.
This is where, though, the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust comes in, because this is kind of tucked away amongst subdivisions and really an unknown place to a lot of us. Have no idea. We know where the bloody angle is in the Park Service land, but not this.
And the Park Service tends to preserve the area that lasts up through the 13th of May. And so that's one reason why this has been overlooked, because it's outside of the park boundaries, and so it's outside of that story that the park preserves. There are housing developments on most sides of this. A developer had looked at trying to turn this into a subdivision. Fortunately, the landowner was a willing negotiator. He wanted to work with Central Virginia Battlefields Trust, and he was the one who really struck a fantastic deal to make sure that this 73 plus acres would be preserved.
So what is it? What are on some of these? Some of this? Are there? What's here?
So, if you drive down the road, there's not a lot you can see. So you have to kind of get into the interior. And that's one of the cool things that Central Virginia Battlefields Trust is looking to do, is open this up for interpretation. There are still some remains of earthworks that you can see in a couple spots alongside the road. But once you get inside the property itself, that's really where things kind of unspool a little bit. We get to see this area here, the topography that we talked about just a little bit. In the area that's just a little bit to my rear, George Gordon Meade, commander of the Army of the Potomac, almost got captured. His men will take this hill early in the day on the 14th of May. He'll come up to check things out, and a Confederate counterattack almost captures the Army commander. He does make a getaway across the stream down behind us. So that story is told. The old roadbed that he used to get up here and move is still here. And also the original Myers farmhouse site is still here as well. There are a couple of slave cabins that were located in this area. There's an ice house. The foundation of the original farmhouse is here. The well for the farmhouse is here. And there are also plenty of earthworks that crisscross the property as well.
There's a lot to do here. There's a lot. There's and a lot of stories to be told.
Absolutely. We're going to try to do a little commando walking and talking here.
Okay.
If I don't kill our camera person here, Ted, you're very kind to do this. If we go up the hill just a little bit outside of this right-of-way, which belongs to the utility companies, and we get into the interior a little bit, we can see the remains, as I hit the tree, we can see the remains of some of the farm buildings. Off here, this is the old ice house. You can see how deep it was because they wanted to get that ice down in the ground so that it would be cool. They could keep ice all the way into the summertime. And, you know, people who don't know any better might think like, oh, there's this big pit that's here in the ground. Okay?
Yeah. To the untrained eye, that's just a that's just a rock sitting there, but there's a story.
So it does look like it's just a rock. That's one of the kind of the fun things. My friend, local historian John Cummings, actually explained this the story of this rock to me. Notice that it is rectangular and fairly even in size and shape. That's because it used to be the doorstep to the house. It is sat right over in this direction in what used to be the back door of the house. And in the past 150 years, some kids from the local neighborhood picked it up, moved it over here, and sat it next to what became their fire pit. They used bricks from the old chimney to create themselves a place to come out here and hang out and have fires in the evening. So this is actually not just a random stone, but part of the house.
And so the house is over there.
The house is over here, and you can see kind of the footprint where you've got this extension here and then the larger section back there, which would have been the main portion of the house. So here you might have had like a root cellar or some sort of auxiliary portion of the house. All the stones and the fireplaces are in kind of both ends. You can see a lot of the stones for the original foundation are still in here. So it really gives us a sense of like what sort of house did these folks own? A couple stories tall, rather modest. The Myers family was not here at the time of the battle, but they did have a caretaker who foolishly took pot shots at the Union soldiers that were up here. So when they finally took possession, the Union finally took possession of this hilltop, they torched the house in retaliation. John Myers was actually down in the line along what's today is Heath Salient. He could see the black smoke rising from the hill, and he realized something was going terribly wrong at his old homestead. He couldn't come up here to do anything about it.
What's fun, Chris, about walking around places like this is that you look at the house and just the stories and real people lived here. Well,
and that to me is so important because these are people just like you and me, Ted. People who owned homes, who had families, who were trying to go about their daily lives, and suddenly the plague of war falls upon them and disrupts things in such dramatic ways. But, you know, to be honest, they're just like you and me. So we are just to the north of the house site. The house site is off to my right. You can see it's uphill slightly, a little tough to see when you're on camera, but there's just a slight rise. The house is sitting up there on the crest of the hill. And then down here, Confederate defenders put together a quick set of earthworks. It runs in a semicircular configuration to help protect the house. The Union Army is going to be off in that direction, which is north. They're going to move into that area on the night of the 13th and the morning of the 14th. The Confederates that are up here are the 9th Virginia Cavalry, and so they're going to try to dig in real quick and give themselves some sort of protection. The Federals are going to attack in enough force to drive the Confederates from this hill, so these earthworks aren't going to do a whole lot to actually give the Confederates a whole lot of protection.
One of the ways people can help speed up the interpretation of this is to get involved with the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust.
If I'll put my little commercial message in here, this property cost almost $500,000 for CVBT to preserve. And so that money is going to come from folks just like you here in our local community who believe that these resources are unique, they're worth preserving, they're worth passing down to future generations so that we can remember the story of the generations of those who came before us.
Well, and the stories that you just tell, and you just told kind of the quick overview, the names of generals that were on this land and involved with Myers Hill are generals, you know, that we all know the names.
And some great stories too. People like to hear about the Zouave regiments, the 140th New York, which came from the Rochester, New York area. They were wearing the very fiery red pantaloons and fancy French-styled uniforms. They fought in this area. Brigadier General Emory Upton, who just a few days earlier at Spotsylvania had led an important breakthrough on May 10th, got promoted from colonel to brigadier general. He's going to be on this property. George Gordon Meade is going to be here. So it's a who's who of folks here in the Army of the Potomac, and just some fantastic story. Another thing, just some local fellas, the 9th Virginia Cavalry. They were from this area. They're going to be the first defenders of this property.
It's so interesting that this is, again, just tucked away as development is around. But this, unlike a lot of other areas, this has been saved.
There are so many stories in this area that are still worth preserving, that are still important to our own history. And it's really a privilege to be able to be out here on this ground and tell these stories and share these stories and save these stories.